Sair da escola já com uma formação profissional no currículo? Parece bom demais pra ser verdade, né? Pois é. No ensino técnico do Senac, isso é possível. É ensino médio junto com formação técnica, que acontece durante os 3 anos. Lá, eles usam metodologia para projetos, desenvolvendo competências como resolução de problemas, pensamento crítico e colaboração, além de valores éticos e sustentáveis. Quer saber? Senac. Acesse sp.senac.br/ensino médio e saiba mais. Ideal mesmo para o mundo atual seria fazer o ensino médio junto com o curso técnico, certo? É no Senac que o aluno tem autonomia de verdade, formação cidadã, foco na diversidade, preparação para o Enem, material didático sem taxas e muito mais. Na real, tem tudo que você precisa para se sentir preparado para a vida. Seja para entrar no mundo do trabalho ou te ajudar a decidir o que fazer na faculdade. Quer saber? Senac. Vem comigo! Acesse sp.senac.br/ensino-médio-técnico.
Hi there, I am Sarah Jane Case, and I'm the host of your new favorite show, Enneagram and Coffee. This podcast is dedicated to discussing the beautiful and hard parts of being human. We discuss the Enneagram, a personality map that is taking over the world, for increased self-compassion, personal growth, and healthier relationships. Listen to Enneagram and Coffee on the iHeart app or wherever you get your podcasts.
The morning of the summer solstice, Feyre attends Ianthe's ceremony dressed like a queen and usurps the priestess's plan to adorn herself with light. The small miracle of Feyre's solstice blessing from the sun spins the spring court into a fervor. The evening ends with Tamlin finding Feyre entangled with Lucien. When Feyre and Lucien again accompany the Highburn commanders to the wall, Tamlin concedes with idle threats. Their venture to the wall brings Dagden and Branna in contact with the children of the Bless, and despite Feyre's warning to not touch the humans, the outing ends with their deaths.
The views expressed by the hosts are entirely their own and in no way represent the thoughts or intentions of the original author. This podcast is a discussion shared to spark thought and conversation on the characters and themes of this novel.
Though the hosts speak mostly within the constraints of the book, series spoilers may be discussed with or without warning. Explicit language, as well as themes of sex, violence, abuse, death, and depression will recur throughout this podcast. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to Book Talk for Book Talk, a podcast where we deep dive into the writing of your favorite novels.
This season, we are exploring Sarah J. Maas's most ambitious novel in the Court of Thorns and Roses series. This is Jac.
And I'm Amy. This week, we're discussing chapters 4 through 7 in A Court of Wings and Ruin.
This week, we ask ourselves, to what extent is Feyre rewriting the narrative?
Themes we see in this section include sex and violence, as well as morality and consequences. Chapter 4 starts with the morning of the summer solstice, a day 1 year prior Feyre had thought was the happiest day of her life. Her circumstances are incredibly changed when you think back on the night in Thorns and Roses.
Feyre says that summer solstice was exactly how she remembers, with the streamers and ribbons, food and drink, and the high fae and lesser fairies celebrating together. Feyre is reminiscing on the year before, when things weren't all that bad. And it's important to remember that things weren't all that bad for Feyre then. She was happy, she was falling in love with Tamlin. But what really caught my eye in this description is saying that high fae and lesser fairies were hanging out together, something that was not seen in the summer court and that she's only seen in the night court. Feyre even thinks about Tarquin and wonders what the summer court is up to during summer solstice. He is a male that she respects and she likes his vision, but he's also a high lord of a court that wasn't as casual as what's going on here. To me, it's a small glimpse and a reminder that Tamlin, dare we say, has potential.
Wow.
I know. Controversy coming left and right in this episode.
Feyre is the image of a goddess of purity in her white velvet, on her moon-pale mare with a silver mane, and with white hawthorn blossoms in her braided crown. That entire sentence was difficult to say.
We were practicing this. Moon-pale mare. Moon-pale mare.
Moon-pale mare.
Moon-pale mare.
Moon-pale mare. Moon-pale mare.
Hi, bartender. I would like to order 1 moon-pale air, please. Wait, pale air?
Mare.
Bear.
So, wait, moon pale mare, really? The references tonight are still here in case you wondered about Feyre's allegiance.
How about the fact that Tamlin lifts Feyre onto the moon pale mare, like he's handing her over to Rhys?
Ayo!
Ew! Every move he makes, every move you make hands me over to Rhys.
That's a song someone needs to write.
Yeah.
Let's also look at the hawthorn blossoms. These flowers represent fertility, love, longevity, grace, and beauty. They are part of Feyre's camouflage and how she fools everyone to believe she truly belongs in the spring court, as well as just like she's there to be the mother of everything for everybody.
Yeah. I'm your mommy, bitch. That doesn't work like I'm your daddy.
No, it doesn't. Instead, though, the flowers actually mock Ianthe, just like Feyre's outfit.
Also, the hawthorn blossoms are on her head, braided into her hair to make a crown. Rhys loves giving Feyre crowns, and they were always real crowns, by the way. Here, Tamlin finally gets a crown on her head, because we knew that he tried before, but instead these are just flower crowns, and it's something that's going to wilt at the end of the day and die. It doesn't have actual substance to it.
I love that interpretation, but I actually saw it differently when I was reading this.
Really?
I did.
You didn't tell me.
I did not tell you. I didn't see the flower crown being a gift from Tamlin. I actually saw Feyre giving herself this crown, emulating what Rhys would have given her because Tamlin wouldn't ever give that to her. But yes, the whole idea of it being flowers and wilting and dying.
I just love both of our interpretations.
No, I love it.
I love it. It's like we're so great at this. I don't mean that. It's just like, to me, it's moments like these where I'm like, literature's so fun. We can like read the same thing and have two totally different but valid thoughts.
Yeah, that's why we do this. It's great.
Tell us your thoughts on our website. Go to booktalkforbooktalk.com.
Nice plug.
Thank you.
Feyre is definitely trying to outshine Ianthe with her outfit, and once again, we are reminded that clothing can be a weapon. This is emphasized when Feyre, quote, wondered if Ianthe could spy the wolf grinning beneath my smile. As Feyre and Tamlin approach Ianthe, Feyre briefly recalls her would-have-been wedding day to Tamlin and wonders if he remembers it as well. In fact, this whole scene is essentially reenacting the wedding Feyre and Tamlin should have had on the anniversary of the happiest day of Feyre's life. Let's look at the scene. Just like the wedding, Feyre is dressed in white, Tamlin in spring court green, and they approach an altar where Ianthe awaits. The altar is like a wedding altar. It's covered in flowers, they say prayers, there's wine, and they perform rituals like lighting candles that is done and feels very familiar to a variety of wedding rituals, even in our own cultures.
Yeah, they do. Feyre mentions the flowers that were strewn about on her would-be wedding day, the same that they're strewn about on summer solstice. We can make a point that those red flowers back on her would-be wedding day, the ones that Ianthe picked back then, despite Feyre telling her don't pick red, that was the final straw for Feyre in her panic attack that day, and that panic attack is what made her call for help and what made Rhys come. It's just kind of like a nice little throwback, you know, that Feyre's doing. Like, look at her now, not freaking out about flowers on the floor.
Yeah, it's great.
Proud of her.
Even the words Ianthe says here remind me of what she said in Mist and Fury. Where at the wedding, Ianthe intoned, quote, let good triumph at last. At this solstice celebration, Ianthe says, quote, as the light is strongest today, let it drive out unwanted darkness. Let it banish the black stain of evil.
Let it wash away my sanity, 'cause I want... No, Hilary Duff?
Nope,
Okay.
Didn't listen to Hilary Duff.
Whoa, you were in China.
I was in China.
Wow, all right.
I'm sorry.
It's just... You know, every single time you say that and I realize that you miss something, another part of me dies. I just want you to know.
I'm causing your death.
Yeah, you are. Slow and painful. Feyre is battling with how she views Tamlin and also struggling with not wanting to understand him. Does Tamlin deserve Feyre's understanding? No, he was horrible to her at the end. But the fact that Feyre is back in the spring court, she's spending time with him, like she's in his immediate proximity, it means you have to understand the enemy. Like, you can't just ignore who your enemy has become. First, we have Feyre struggling with the idea of Rhys and Tamlin letting her get married. Feyre thinks about how Rhys would have let Feyre marry Tamlin, and she romanticizes it because Rhys told himself that if it's what made Feyre happy, then he was going to go along with it. With the bond, though, that Rhys and Feyre have, there's no way that Rhys didn't feel how miserable she was with Tamlin. And there's no way that he didn't feel that she was falling out of love with him. And right now, Feyre is romanticizing Rhys's own shit that he was going through.
I have a thought
Yeah.
about that. I think she romanticizes his shit and his willingness to let her marry Tamlin because it's the exact opposite of how she views Tamlin right now. That Tamlin would not allow her to just remain with Rhys.
Yeah.
And that's why she romanticizes it.
Absolutely. I love that. I love that. But I want to view this narrative a little differently. Tamlin also was going to let Feyre marry him, despite him knowing that Feyre had a lot of trauma going on, that she wasn't doing well. But as far as Tamlin knew, Feyre wanted to get married. And the reason why this is important is because of my next point. Basically, it's what Feyre thinks of Tamlin. Quote, "What did he make of it? Where did he think that ring had gone if Lucien had hidden the evidence? For a heartbeat, I pitied him. Pitied that not only Lucien had lied to him, but Alice as well. How many others had seen the truth of my suffering and tried to spare him from it, seen my suffering and had done nothing to help me?" Okay, so Feyre realizes that after she left the Spring Court, the people surrounding Tamlin perpetuated the narrative that she'd been taken. Tamlin genuinely thought Feyre was taken and was being sexually assaulted, probably right at that moment. But I want to go even farther. Feyre also lied to Tamlin about their relationship back in Mist and Fury. She didn't push for healing. She didn't tell him that she wasn't ready to get married. As far as Tamlin knew, Feyre wanted to get married. Now, we do talk about this in season 2. So if you're listening to this for the first time and you're like, shut up, Jack, like go back in season 2, we cover all bases there. And we recognize that Feyre does eventually try to talk to Tamlin about what's going on inside of her. And she is dealing with a lot of PTSD. They are both dealing with a lot of PTSD. It was a very toxic, bad situation. And yes, like Tamlin was the more toxic of the two. Like we recognize that. But it was still a narrative that Feyre helped perpetuate, that she was in love with Tamlin and wanted to marry him. As we go into this ceremony, I really want to highlight the religious aspect to this portion. This is a religious service, and Feyre is going to take full advantage of that, and we'll show you examples as we go along.
This is where we see Feyre's true manipulation on display. In doing so, Feyre reveals which side of good and evil she thinks each of the main players fall. Let's start with Feyre and Lucien. These two remain removed from the rituals, just as Feyre had planned, because she doesn't feel the need to mock Lucien in her manipulation of Ianthe and Ianthe's ritual. No, in fact, Feyre wants to keep Lucien as far as possible from Ianthe.
So the way that everyone's standing and ends up standing where Feyre and Lucien are alone, and it's kind of like she's all bridal. Lucien knows that Feyre set it up this way. At least it's implied that he does. Do you think Lucien believes that Feyre is playing up this particular glorification part, or just that Feyre had a hand in the arrangements, the standing arrangements?
At this moment, Lucien probably only perceives it as Feyre having influenced the standing arrangements. Because if you really look at what's happening in the action, the Hybern commanders are saying prayers. I think Jorian's lighting a candle, or Tamlin, Tamlin's doing something now. It's almost as if those four are getting married to each other.
They're all, as you say, like, when they're like, they all get into bed with each other, but not in a sexy way. They're just like about to all kill each other.
I think he's just seeing this play out as like, what are you doing?
Yeah. Like, all right, why are we standing here?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, the Hybern commanders, Tamlin and Jorian, end up with Ianthe, not unlike how Feyre perceives all these individuals to be allied for the majority of Wings and Ruin. As Jack said, they're getting in bed with one another. As I said, they're getting married to one another. This physical positioning of the characters is also subliminally convincing us as readers of this perception, that all but Feyre and Lucien are on the wrong side of the war. Feyre uses this to her advantage to usurp Ianthe's ritual, because, quote, Feyre Cursebreaker, who had led Prythian from tyranny and darkness, blessed, holy, undimming before evil, I let my glow spread until it too rippled from Lucien's bowed form, a knight before his queen. It is so obvious from Feyre's clothing and hair choices that this was planned from the start. I wonder, though, is this somehow not just about showing up Ianthe? And is it more than just Feyre's plans for bringing down the Spring Court from the inside? For the first time, Feyre has fully claimed her role as Cursebreaker in the Spring Court, something she's already gotten to do in the Night Court. You can't tell me that on some level she isn't enjoying this, embracing that last bit of herself in front of the Spring Court. Jack, what do you think?
Oh, absolutely. Like, the last time she was in the Spring Court, her powers were all hush-hush. And she was made to feel shame about it, embarrassed. Like, at one point, I think she even said to Rhys, like, I mean, maybe she didn't say this to Reese, but like I felt like the implied vibe was, oh, are you embarrassed that I'm stronger than you? Is it shameful that I'm doing this? Maybe we shouldn't let our enemies know. And she learned pretty quickly over at the night court, like, no.
Let your light shine.
Let your light shine, baby girl. And now she gets to kind of do this, and you can almost view it as like a little extra, as we like to say, fuck you, to Tamlin.
Oh, you know what? This is related to your next point that you make.
Uh-huh.
We said let your light shine totally reminds me of a Bible verse.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's also like the song, like, this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine.
Yeah.
Let it shine.
Yeah, let it shine. Let your light so shine before men that they may see your...
Hoo-ha?
I don't remember if it's good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven.
I like my version. Let your shine light before men.
That they may see your hoo-ha.
Yeah, you know what? That shit's divine. I think Feyre is weaponizing faith and religion here. Feyre has seen how people react to her being Feyre Cursebreaker, but now she's going to make herself appear as Cauldron Blessed, which is very ironic because Feyre's sisters are literally Cauldron Blessed. I say that Feyre is weaponizing religion here because in a few pages, Feyre's going to go on and describe what happened to be as a small miracle and then begin to compare herself to a god.
I want to go back to something you said about Feyre's sisters being Cauldron Blessed. It didn't occur to me that that's the case until you said it.
Yeah.
Because they view it as Cauldron Cursed. And I've always viewed it as Cauldron Cursed.
Yeah.
But they're actually Cauldron Blessed.
I mean, Elaine was really blessed because, like, you know, Cauldron was obsessed with her. It was like, here, take all the powers.
Mm-hmm.
And then Nesta was just like, you're going to curse me, bitch.
Bitch,
Or, you're going to bless me. Bless me. Bless me now.
I'm not leaving till you bless me. Let's talk about sex as a symbol of power in this scene. As the sun rises and Ianthe thinks it will light her up and make her appear powerful, quote, Ianthe's back arched, her body a mere vessel for the solstice's light to fill, and what I could see of her face was already limned in pious ecstasy. The sun rose, a held, gilded note echoing through the land. Like an orgasm.
Mm-hmm.
Even Feyre's description of the sun seems sexual. Quote, it took Ianthe longer than anyone else to look, to turn to see that the sun's power was not filling her, blessing her.
I'm going to position this a little differently. Why now that I say position and we're talking about sex, I'm like, ooh, how many positions can this go? I think that I feel so wrong saying that and then going into my next line.
Oh, that's hilarious.
I think that Feyre is meant to be the Madonna here to Ianthe's thriving sexual performance. Feyre ends up glowing with literal light. She is filled with the sun, with the blessing. She is meant to be pure, while Ianthe is meant to be the sexual heathen. Going back to your quote that Feyre is blessed, holy, undimmed before evil.
It's totally a great point, because when you think about Renaissance paintings of the Madonna, she has a nimbus, which is that glow around her, which means purity.
Yeah, not to be confused with Goku's nimbus cloud that he flies on.
Or Harry Potter's Nimbus 2000.
Yeah, many options here.
So many nimbuses. In reaction to Feyre taking away Ianthe's sun, the spring court goes positively nuts. Feyre, who was once sent into depressive spirals every time she was thanked and adored in early Mist and Fury, now accepts the adoration of the spring court, quote, beatifically, thanking them, smiling at them. Some of it was genuine. I had no quarrel with the people of these lands, but the courtiers and sentries who sought me out, I put on a better show for them. It's extremely ironic to me that this was what was once expected of Feyre. Now she's only capable of it out of spite and deceit. Makes me feel like she's a hypocrite.
Yeah, it's just that, like, I have no quarrel with them, but I'm gonna screw all of you over and make sure that Hybern gets in here and bring down your court so that you don't have a single army to defend you.
Yep.
But, like, you know, it's not personal.
In Feyre's defense, I did cut the quote that made it clear that she's differentiating between the lesser fairies and then, like, the courtiers who are close to Tamlin.
Yeah, but I mean... Then
but, like, fuck all of you.
Yeah, but eventually she'll learn, like, there was no selective...
Yeah, you can't be selective with who you bless and who you destroy.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you can't cut off the head of the snake and be like, but I have no issues with the body.
Yeah. Cut off the tail. I have no issues with the tail.
Yeah, exactly. Feyre has found another weapon here, and she's adding it to her arsenal. one that even Rhys hasn't tapped into. Feyre is being the absolute opposite of Rhys here. Rhys is normally evil incarnate, while Feyre has now embraced being a god.
Damn, Feyre.
Damn.
Tamlin acts wary, though, quote, as if the blessing somehow upset me, as if he remembered that same light in Hybern and could not figure out why it disturbed him so.
You know how we always say that Feyre is an unreliable narrator?
Mm-hmm.
Hearing you read that quote, again, reminds me that, and I didn't write this in our notes, but I almost kind of interpreted his, what'd she call it, hesitation? His wariness, not as a concern for her, but as a, realization of, oh shit, is she maybe more powerful? Or what's going on here? I always found it as a wariness of her, not for concern of her.
Yeah, I agree with you. I saw the wariness not as concern for her, but a wariness of this doesn't feel right. I feel like I'm missing something.
Yeah, which kind of goes into your next point.
Yes.
Beautifully.
Thank you. So my next point is something that I wrote to myself while I was doing my initial read through for the season. And this note says, it should be so obvious that this is not Feyre. The Feyre who's smiling and thanking everyone. It goes against the core of who she is or who she was before she left the Spring Court, and who Tamlin and the others know her to be. But this Feyre, the Feyre who is smiling and who is engaging with everyone, is exactly who Tamlin and company wanted. That's what they wanted of Feyre for so long that I wonder if they overlook who she is right now.
What's funny is that this person, who Feyre is being the one who's gracious, takes on people's admiration and respect. It's really her, because now that she's embraced being High Lady and she spent time in the Night Court, we end up seeing her being a good High Lady, of being able to greet people. This moment is probably the most honest, pure version of her. Mm-hmm. But to your point, Tamlin doesn't know that.
Right.
This should be a huge red flag to him.
Right. And you can't tell me that the change isn't jarring.
Yeah. That
she's gone from being this mopey person, stolen away by the Night Court, allegedly assaulted.
Yeah.
And then comes back and is like, oh, yes, I'm a High Lady.
She's 30, flirty, and thriving.
Yeah.
But not 30. But
it doesn't make sense.
No, it's wait a minute. I think it really was trauma. No, I like to imagine that Feyre's really not reading him well right now.
Yeah.
I think he totally is catching on to her, but I still don't think that he thinks that Feyre's there to bring down the court.
Yeah.
If anything, I'm going to argue that maybe Tamlin's realizing, oh, wow, Feyre probably wasn't tortured, wasn't going through all this stuff there, but she chose to be with me.
Mm-hmm.
She chose to come back here with me.
Yeah, maybe he just is feeling lucky.
Yeah.
Of just, okay, maybe I can't be mad at Rhys because she seems to be fine.
Yeah.
And I'm just glad that she chose to come back.
I'm sure he still believes that some bad things happen, but clearly some great things happen.
Right.
And if this great Feyre is here willingly at his side, then, wow, maybe I did something right.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Sad. When Feyre takes a moment to herself to reach out to Rhysand, she goes into the manor, into a private room, where she, quote, set her crown of flowers on the dressing table and smiled slightly at the eye tattooed into her right palm. Feyre literally takes off the mantle of the sun or the Spring Court in order to commune with the High Lord of the Night Court, as if it would be offensive to be in her role as Tamlin's consort or to be donned in the power of the sun when talking to Rhys, who is literal night.
Snaps for Amy. Snaps for Amy.
Thank you. I just wanted to point that out as interesting positioning that SJM deliberately chose to include that wasn't necessary. It's not necessary for Feyre to take off her crown in order to talk to Rhys. So the action itself is very symbolic.
Oh, yeah. I love it. I love it so much. Just the thought and purpose you put behind writing.
This is when we start to see some breadcrumbs for the Faebane in the Spring Court food. When Feyre hears from Rhysand, quote, the words were distant, strained. Each word was quieter than the last. And then when Feyre finishes speaking to Rhys, she naturally has to put the flower crown back on because she's got to put that role back on.
She's totally going into this role, this fake Feyre that she knows that she has to be. Quote, as I approached, no more than a shy, hesitant doe. Once, the same sounds that had shaken me awake had made me dance and dance. I suppose they were not little more than weapons in my arsenal as I stopped before Tamlin. All right, a lot to unpack here. Feyre knows that she's no longer the doe. In season 1, we talked a lot about Feyre comparing herself to a doe and the evolution of that throughout the book. And she knows now that that's the mask. Feyre also knows that the memories from the year before can be weaponized against Tamlin. I would like to acknowledge that the sounds that woke Feyre up wasn't for summer solstice the year before. It was for Calamai. You know, like there were the drums, the sexy drums that woke her up.
Yeah, you're right. And I wonder to what extent this goes back to something I said in last week's episode, that Feyre is rewriting her memories and history with Tamlin to fit whatever narrative she feels is appropriate now.
Yeah, which goes into the question that we have for the week.
Right. She's an unreliable narrator.
Yeah.
Can't trust a damn thing from her.
Not right now. Not ever.
I also wanted to point out that you said we talked about the evolution of Feyre as the doe in Thorns and Roses. We also talk about the evolution of Feyre as the wolf in Mist and Fury, which is why she has to put that doe mask on.
Yeah.
She's a wolf in doe clothing.
I've noticed several times over, she keeps saying, I wonder if Ianthe saw the wolf behind the smile. I keep trying to smile like that. Like, ready?
Mm-hmm.
Hold on.
No. You're not capable of it.
Shit. Wow.
I mean that with the most love on the planet.
Stabbed in the heart.
No, you're just too innocent looking.
Yeah. As I have like pigtails on right now.
Yeah, exactly.
You do it. Yep, there it is.
You know what I think of actually? I think of the Samara weaving photo that you used for your fan cast of Ianthe.
Yep, that's exactly.
It's that smile.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I can't do that smile.
I can't do that smile either. My mouth doesn't move that far.
Yeah, the dentist told me I had a small mouth.
You also didn't react to my joke that she's a wolf in doe clothing.
I did not.
You were so focused on yourself that you skipped right over it.
I'm so sorry. I think you made that joke yesterday too.
No, I said it for the first time here.
I just kind of glazed. Yeah, I'm sorry.
It's
you know
okay.
What?
You had really important thoughts to say and it's okay.
About myself. Look, the listeners heard that and they thought it was hilarious.
That's all that matters. I want to talk about how the nighttime revelry of the summer solstice in Wings and Ruin is a parody of Starfall in Mist and Fury, which, if you remember, we argued last season was a parallel to the summer solstice of Thorns and Roses. Full circle, baby.
It's great. It's great.
So what do I mean? Let's analyze what's happening here. After speaking to Rhys, when the dancing has begun, Feyre approaches Tamlin and asks him to dance with her, just like she asked Rhys to dance with her during Starfall. Like Rhys, Tamlin reacts with, quote, relief, happiness, and dances with Feyre. Feyre and Tamlin even slow dance toward the end, just as Rhys and Feyre did at the end of Starfall. Let's now move a little bit away from Starfall, and let's think back to Thorns and Roses. Feyre lets Tamlin serve her food when she grows hungry. Quote, I let him fill a plate for me. Let him serve me himself. This is the very role Tamlin insisted on having when Feyre first arrived to the Spring Court in Thorns and Roses. And it's in response to Feyre's implication that she was glad that Tamlin didn't complete the rite at Calamai, that maybe Feyre might even accept Tamlin in her own bed. Feyre has returned to that, quote, shy, hesitant doe, as Jac pointed out, from Thorns and Roses, to fool Tamlin into complacency and to take advantage of him. What was once her weakness is now her strength.
I also get flashbacks to their first meal together when Tamlin was serving Feyre food and told her it was a great honor for High Fae to serve a human, which we then talked about that scene mimicking the mating ceremony. And I think that's what's happening right now as well. I also feel like Feyre almost has a checklist of memories that she's going through for Tamlin, because we already established that she's weaponizing memories and she's kind of like, what can I go through here?
Yeah.
Hit him in the emotional gut.
Well, it's almost psychology of if I recreate these steps, he's going to anticipate what comes next based on memory.
Which is him going to her room.
Right.
Absolutely. Feyre and Tamlin are always going to be stuck in this dynamic that they're never going to ever be able to actually be honest with one another. Quote, I never asked if it was worth it, if giving up the sort of peace was worth it, in order to have me back. But I kept quiet as the sunlight faded and night finally fell.
Sunlight faded, Tamlin. Night fell, Rhys. Just saying. The evening ends as night falls, and the, quote, stars wink into existence, dim and small. I watched them through the long hours of celebrating and could have sworn that they kept me company, my silent and stalwart friends. On the longest day of the year, after Feyre has stolen the sun from Ianthe and used it to win the hearts of the spring court, Feyre only finds comfort in the stars, a reoccurring theme for her when you think about her dresser in her family's cottage, Starfall, and all the other night/star/Reese symbolism in this series.
Yep.
SJM is nothing but consistent.
I love it.
Feyre retreats from the summer solstice act. Blah, 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 blah.
It's my Blue's Clues interpretation.
I loved it. That's exactly what I thought of.
Yeah, I'm really good at it. That's like
it's very good.
my one impression I've got.
Blue sky do, we can do. So good. Feyre retreats from the summer solstice activities at the start of Chapter 5 when Tamlin starts making eyes at her that remind her of a year ago when he kissed her as the sun rose. This is the complete antithesis, by the way, of Feyre's affinity for night. In bed, away from the festivities and the adoration of the spring court, Feyre cannot sleep. Quote, the adder, the weaver, my sisters being thrown into the cauldron, all of them twined and eddied around me. I let them. Just like the sheets on her bed and her night sweat, Feyre lets these memories that fuel her revenge tangle around her and drown her.
Also, this quote, I changed into my nightgown, a small lacy thing I'd once worn for Tamlin's enjoyment. Feyre throughout Mist and Fury and now here always kind of had annoyance about wearing lacy things for Tamlin.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you do wear lacy things for Reese and you like it.
Mm-hmm.
It just shows like you don't like Tamlin. You know, like stop kind of like shaming him in the process. Like I wore it for his enjoyment. What are you doing with Reese then? Like,
I wonder if it's because Tamlin always destroyed them.
And she's like, I wanted to use it again.
Yeah, it's such a waste of money if you destroy it.
Are you saying that Reese never destroyed a pair? Talon toes with his toes. He just like reached up to her underwear and just ripped it off with his big old toe.
If we think about it, they haven't had enough sexual encounters at this point for us to know.
That's true. I'm just imagining a toe now. Slipping below her like hip bone.
No, I'm just thinking of like leaning back in bed and being like, let me take off your underwear with my toes.
Yes. Slashing through your bra with your pinky toe.
That's hilarious. Just as Feyre is focused on revenge, Feyre continues to emulate Reese as she pads into Lucian's room after a supposed nightmare. Quote, truth, and half a lie. I still dreamed of those horrible days under the mountain, but no longer did they consume me. This is how Feyre convinces even sly, clever Lucian of her piety when she is deceitful, because his main frame of reference for Feyre was her time directly before and after Under the Mountain. Feyre is using what Lucian knows about her against him.
Also about Lucian here, quote, bare from the waist up, he managed to haul on a pair of pants before opening the door and hastily buttoned them as I strode past. I get it now. I get it.
There's also a description of like his sculpted chest, and it was like very deliberately objectifying him, and it was very strange to me.
Yeah, I'm just like, which is funny because like this is the one where we're the most like their siblings.
Right.
So like I'm very aware of him now.
It's very intentional on SJM's part, and I wonder why?
Well, because Farrah's hypersexualizing their relationship, even though we argue that they're becoming more brother-sister, but Feyre has been making their dynamic appear sexual. So even though she has no desire for him, he has no desire for her, but if her eyes linger on his chest, if she notes that his buttoning up, I don't know, there was something about like him buttoning up his pants.
Oh, yeah.
I was like, there's nothing sexier than a man putting on clothes.
What is it about us viewing men putting on clothes as sexy, but they view women taking off clothes as sexy?
Yeah, like, am I wrong though? Like a man
you're not.
buttoning up like his like his shirt, and then like fixing his
or like zipping up his fly and then buttoning it.
Oh, that's good. Or like he put on a nice button-up shirt and now he's like fixing the cuffs and stuff and he rolls it up like. Whoo.
Or when he does that little jump to get his jeans over his butt. Why is that sexy?
I don't know, but my eyes are closed and I'm there. Yeah, I had not had a moment of Lucian appreciation until that line where I was like, oh, you mean he buttoned up his pants? Oh, yes, please. Sign me up.
I do wonder if, to your point, she's hypersexualizing their interactions. But also, if you think back to Thorns and Roses, she didn't observe this of Lucian because she was hyper-focused on Tamlin.
Yeah.
She only had eyes for Tamlin. That's why we never saw this of Lucian.
Yep. But here we are with eyes observing.
And we see Lucian.
I see him. When Feyre tells Lucien about her fake dream, and what she's recapping is about her time underneath the mountain, because she can't tell him all her other issues, right? It's just the stuff that he knows. Feyre pretends to cry in his chest, and Lucien holds her and says, "I'm sorry." I feel like this is really his first real apology to Feyre. What do you think?
I felt the same when I read this section. And when I think about it, what is he apologizing for? I think he's not only apologizing for Under the Mountain, he's also making assumptions about what happened to her at the Night Court. And he's apologizing for those things too because of his contributions that drove her towards the Night Court. And that's sad.
Yeah.
He's apologizing for probably one of the best things that happened to her.
Yeah. That's a shame. He'll figure it out.
Soon. Tamlin falls into Feyre's trap, where he finds Feyre and his best friend tangled and scantily clad. In this moment, Tamlin's trusty old claws make an appearance. Tamlin, if we recall from Thorns and Roses, was a beast with no claws. Though they were ever present, he was reticent to use them in ways that were meaningful to Feyre, except to maybe kill a few Naga. Tamlin's instinct is for the claws to appear, to make him seem threatening. This scene specifically reminds me of how they appeared but retracted at the wedding scene in Mist and Fury when Rhys arrived to steal Feyre away. Quote, "The beginnings of claws glinted at Tamlin's knuckles. Tamlin was just staring at Lucien, whose mouth was tightened into a thin line as he marked those claws, still half drawn. Tamlin didn't sheath his claws, didn't summon them any further either. What have we always said? Tamlin's half-assed. He won't even reclaim his woman from his best friend. Because even though Amarantha isn't around, Tamlin still acts like a leashed dog."
On the flip side, we could probably also say that this is proof of Tamlin's growth, that he is learning how to hold back. We know that Tamlin is capable of exploding, and Feyre is literally pushing and pushing, trying to get him to do that, but he's holding back. It's almost like Feyre is pissed that Tamlin has learned restraint. She's just going to keep going until he explodes. Later on, we'll get that study scene when he explodes. I feel like Feyre was almost waiting for that to happen here.
I think you might be right. And I wonder to what extent that's frustrating for her, to the point that she's so frustrated at him that somehow it justifies in her mind that he's still a bad guy instead of realizing, oh, he's grown.
Yeah.
Maybe I need to just take a step back and reevaluate.
Yeah, Mist and Fury Tamlin. If he saw the two of them hugging, he would have destroyed Lucien right then and there.
Oh, yeah, totally. As much as I'd love to put Tamlin down, let's really evaluate Feyre and her manipulation of both Tamlin and Lucien. Don't get me wrong. I love powerful, manipulative Feyre. I am a Slytherin at heart. But Feyre is what she says she is. Quote, a nightmare, preying on what Tamlin had feared from her very first days at the Spring Court. Where saving Velaris and Mist and Fury made Feyre High Lady of the Night Court, when you think about it, Feyre's actions at the Spring Court make her High Lady of the Court of Nightmares. She is enjoying this game and the friendship that she is essentially destroying, taking a moment to smile at the ruins. Notice that after smiling, Feyre makes a point to let us know that she dresses because, quote, there was more work to do. The act of dressing is empowering, like arming herself before battle. And Feyre feels powerful not only to us but to herself as well. And maybe Feyre of old wouldn't have been as ready to admit to this power. While at the start of summer solstice, Feyre compared herself to a queen, when she remembers the events of the morning, she considers herself, quote, a newborn god. Who is Feyre Archeron now?
I love that. I don't think she knows. This Feyre Archeron is the most temporary blip in the whole story of Feyre Archeron. Mm-hmm. And I think it's the most jarring part that we see of her because we're just who are you? She doesn't know. She thinks that she knows. I think that this is the most cocky that we'll ever see her be, is in this time at the Spring Court.
Fall has officially started here in Los Angeles, and that means we finally get to do fall activities.
I have been counting down the days for when I can go to pumpkin patches, maybe even hit up an apple orchard, and I get to do all of it looking super cute in my Quince boyfriend sweater.
This weather is perfect for my dark academia vibes, and I'm so excited to bust out my washable silk blouse because I'm going to be taking pictures.
Quince is known for their Mongolian cashmere sweaters from $50. And that's not all. Quince has so many other amazing things on their website.
All of those items are priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands.
That includes leather jackets, cotton cardigans, soft denim. Like, my entire fall wardrobe is genuinely turning into Quince's wardrobe.
By partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the cost of the middleman, we get savings as the customer.
One of my favorite parts about Quince is the fact that they only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices. And they still manage to get premium fabrics and finishes for that, luxury feeling for every item that they have.
Get cozy in Quince's high-quality wardrobe essentials. Go to quince.com/booktalk for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's Quince, QUINCE.com/booktalk, BOOKTALK, to get free shipping and 365-day returns. That's quince.com/booktalk.
A question that Feyre and us as readers will be asking through this book is, did Feyre do the right thing by bringing down the spring court? There's a lot of things that come back and bite her in the ass, but I think it's a question of morality. Later, Feyre makes a case to Rhys that it's time to show the world that they're good people. But is what you're doing good right now, Feyre? I'm not saying that Tamlin is the victim here, but in this particular case, Lucien is the victim because he's going to be the focus of Tamlin's anger, and that's Feyre's doing.
In some warped way, I wonder if this is Feyre enacting what she views as karmic justice. For so long, before she was taken by Rhys to the Night Court, Feyre was also a victim of Tamlin's anger, and now she gets to redirect that anger. But Lucien's always been an object of Tamlin's anger, or suffered Tamlin's anger. But now he's getting even more of it, and it's not fair, but I wonder to what extent in Feyre's mind it is fair.
And that's the problem with karma, is like the second you try to be the one who decides karma, it's now going against you.
Right.
Karma's not your boyfriend.
Karma's not your cat.
It's definitely not purring in your lap
because it loves you.
Yeah, no. It's do you know who's the cat purring? It could have been Tamlin.
Could have been Tamlin.
But it really is like one of those instances where it's like, if you're making justice, it starts to become a little morally gray because you feel like there's a vendetta there. You feel like they've done ill against you, which they have, but you're hurting so many other people in this process. You're not hurting them.
Yeah. I mean, there's a reason why they say justice is blind. That's why we cannot enact justice, because we're not blind.
Yeah.
I mean, Feyre's blind to everyone else that she's harming, but she's not blind to Tamlin.
Yeah. And I will say that, to me, this moment is the beginning of where the morals will be questioned throughout the rest of her time at the Spring Court.
Mm-hmm.
I also have one more quote. A nightmare, I told Tamlin. I was the nightmare. Because, darling, I was a nightmare dressed like a daydream. Gonna be forever. Down in flames. Come on, you knew it was coming.
Yeah, no, it's true.
You knew it was coming.
Was the high worth the pain?
Yeah. Yeah, it was. It was worth everyone else's pain for me to have to do that.
The following morning, at the start of Chapter 6, we see the beginnings of a trend in the novel that stuck out to me in my most recent read-through, and this is how silence is used as a tool to wield power. Let's look at all the silence that's happening. The Hybern commanders are silent at breakfast, implying a sense of inconvenience or that Tamlin and Feyre are being bad hosts for not taking them to see the rest of the wall. Lucien avoids speaking to Feyre in order to convince Tamlin that Lucien's innocent of any impropriety. Feyre herself is grateful for the silence, or a reprieve, maybe using that silence to help prepare and find energy before the next battle of wills. Even Ianthe, quote, carefully avoided acknowledging Feyre, as if I was indeed the blinding sun that had been stolen from her.
It makes so much sense that you have, like, everyone sitting here being quiet, using it for power, and Ianthe's like, hey guys, I'm talking. I'm the least powerful person here.
It's true.
She breaks the silence.
She is not very good at the game.
No.
Another trend for us to keep an eye on is the battle of wills between Ianthe and Feyre. We got our first real showdown between the two of them during the morning of the summer solstice. While we may think that this is justified on Feyre's part, every move Feyre makes to antagonize Ianthe and manipulate her has a consequence, and it's not just the ones Feyre anticipates. Feyre almost gloats, quote, oh, I'd gotten under her skin. I'd been wondering what she'd do after yesterday's solstice, after I robbed her of her moment and power. But wait, when did Feyre become this cunning and cruel?
I think Ianthe is the one and only person there that Feyre has a clear vendetta with. Tamlin and Feyre have a long enough history for her to understand on some level that Tamlin was a good guy deep down inside and at one point, and she's learned since returning how many people have kept Tamlin in the dark and helped build up this narrative for him. So I think against Feyre's own judgment or desire, she's kind of understanding him a little bit. On the flip side, Ianthe has always been a bitch. It reminds me of this TikTok account, and she has like a whole series of that girl. And that girl is like the one who is friends with all the guys, and she's friends with your boyfriend, but like she's like Justin, and she tries to like show that she's closer to your boyfriend, that they have the emotional intimacy, that it's like, oh, you're not friends, like we're friends. And that gives me such Ianthe vibes, and I'll double down on this momentarily.
I hate to admit that I was that girl in high school, but I was.
You know what? You grew.
I grew.
You grew. And every single one of my relationships, there's always been that girl, but they never date you.
No, it's true.
No, sorry, I didn't say it to you. I didn't mean it. I was looking at you, but you know who I was thinking of in my head.
I know who you were thinking of, but the problem is like I was that girl in high school because no one would date me.
Yeah. But it's just like they have such a crush on that guy and they like have to show.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, it's fine.
But
I'm out.
It brings me peace.
No, it's fine.
Every single one of my exes have one.
I've got a girlfriend now. I don't give a shit.
Yeah. You don't have, that's true, right? You move past the problem of all of this.
Men.
Yep. There it is. What I love in this breakfast scene is that when Ianthe comes in and implies that she has super secret knowledge for Tamlin, Feyre tells Ianthe to say it. Feyre doesn't turn to Tamlin. She doesn't phrase it as a question. She tells Ianthe to speak. Side note, when Ianthe talks about the dying lands, she says it's a blight upon the land, a term that was used in Thorns and Roses to describe Amarantha. Ianthe then really doubles down on things dying, and Feyre even points out that this is a scheme to poison the earth and then miraculously heal it. The way that it's phrased, the reference to Amarantha, I was personally kind of convinced that it was foreshadowing. Every single time I read it, I was like, this is foreshadowing to something. And it really isn't. Like, there isn't like a thing later on where the plants start dying. In my heart of hearts, I believe that this is a plot point that SJM's editor told her to take out.
So I didn't give this any thought until you made this point last night. And I do think it's foreshadowing something. And I think it's foreshadowing Feyre's destruction of the Spring Court. Feyre is the blight on the Spring Court now.
Okay, I'm in. I'm sold. You did it. It was just too, like, now Feyre is Amarantha.
Yeah.
Ooh.
And I mean, I think that's what SJM is hinting at. Feyre has
crossed the line.
Crossed a line. That she has embodied the very thing she hates.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. Thank you. You did it for me. It was like, it was too intentional.
Yeah, it was very intentional. Which is why I was like,
there it is.
There it is. Feyre continues, quote, "You think you're playing the game," I itched to tell her, "but you have no idea that every choice you made last night and this morning were only steps I nudged you toward. The problem is that Feyre has not yet learned that she can't control everything, and we'll see the fallout of these actions next episode, and in future episodes. I must say that Feyre in the Spring Court and the fallout of her actions is maybe my favorite thing in this entire series. SJM is so good about not letting her characters or her readers get off the hook easily. As a writer, I appreciate it because it's so tempting to just write actions with no consequences, because consequences are messy and they don't work with the plot we imagine. AKA, they're a pain in the ass for the writer too.
Absolutely. I really think that this book and the whole series is boiled down to consequences, which is how all stories happen, but only the good ones make sense, like this one.
Right. I would say most novels I read, the consequences are afterthoughts, like, oh, well, there has to be consequences. Mm-hmm. Whereas SJM, her narrative only exists because of consequences.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Completely.
And it's a very, very different style of approaching the story.
Which I love.
Yeah, I do too.
I'm not on the notes here, but you're kind of saying that Feyre is the blight on the land. It now has me thinking, I wonder how many clues there are here that we didn't pick up that Feyre is Amarantha. Like the 3 trials that she puts everyone through. What are the different trials that she puts Tamlin through? What are the trials like, or going to the walls 3 times? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
Or the fact that Feyre embraces the dresses, which is something that Amarantha was really more poised to like be the more feminine looking, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm just like wondering, I'm like, ooh, listeners, please have this spark something and go tell us, because I'm not going to reread it. But I'm just like, I bet there's a lot of signs of Feyre is now Amarantha.
I'm sure there is.
Yeah. Ianthe knows how to play this situation as well. Just the fact that Ianthe asks Tamlin if he'll go with the group to the wall, then looks at Lucien and Feyre with that pointed stare. In my mind, I'm over there. I'm like Jurian eating my breakfast, watching all this drama go down. Be like, ooh, love it. Ianthe even slips this in. Ianthe murmured to Tamlin, "Perhaps you should go, my friend," which comes back to what I was saying before with that girl, where I'm like, he's not your friend, Ianthe. What does Feyre love? She loves friends. What is the one thing that she never got to call Tamlin? Her friend. I think Ianthe knows this and is trying to show her emotional intimacy with Tamlin, something that Feyre never got. Still at breakfast, Ianthe suggests that Tamlin should return Rhys's family's wings to help settle things. Ooh, that was a rhymey situation. And I'm surprised that Ianthe was still able to say something that would hit Feyre that hard. It makes me think that maybe Feyre isn't acting as well as she hopes that she is, because this is showing me that Ianthe is starting to pick up, or has always picked up, that Feyre is a mole, a spy, has more connections to Rhys than she's willing to let on. Additionally, Tamlin's reaction is worth calling out. Quote, "When Tamlin answered, his voice was low. I burned them long ago." I could have sworn there was something like remorse and shame in his words. But Feyre isn't willing to explore this. She still sees Tamlin as the man she thinks him to be.
It's a great point. She only has one image of him, and it's the man she met in the cottage when he broke down her family's cottage door.
Yeah. Like, I'm not saying Tamlin is so healed and good now that Feyre can come to him and be like, hey, look, I faked all this. I don't love you, but let's be allies. He's not that good.
Yeah, no.
But rather than trying to tear him down, she should be trying to build him up in a way.
And she's not. She's not capable of it.
No. Also, I want to clarify by like building him up. I didn't mean like, we're putting Tamlin on a pedestal. Just that like she made peace with him. A lot of shit would have not happened. That's all. Just wanted to say that.
And just appealed to the good things that do exist within him.
Yeah.
Tamlin's claws appear again at the end of breakfast when he concedes that Feyre can go with Lucien and the Hybern commanders to the wall without him. Quote, his claws slid free, embedding in the scar-flecked wood of his chair's arm. Be careful. None of us pretended it was anything but a threat. Burn. But let's also think about the fact that Feyre truly thinks so little of Tamlin that she projects her disregard for him onto everyone around him. There's no evidence to prove that anyone, except maybe the Hybern commanders, think so ill of Tamlin. I mean, we talk a lot in the first 2 seasons about Feyre projecting onto Tamlin and projecting onto others. And I feel like when Feyre projects, it just shows her at her most assuming, most
bias.
Yeah, most bias for sure. Good word.
Thank you.
At the camp by the wall, the silence game continues with no obvious victors. What I do find humorous is that Dagden and Branna, quote, picked at the meat sandwiches we'd packed, frowning at them as if they were full of maggots instead. One theme we talk about in all of our seasons is that food is power. So if the sandwiches are power from the spring court, what does it mean for the food to be equated to maggots? The spring court is poisoned from within, at least from Feyre's point of view.
I feel like that's the logical, smart answer. But in my mind, what's canon is that the spring court is the food is super bland and gross, and what they're looking at is a dry-ass turkey sandwich that doesn't even have mayo in it.
Why? What's the point?
What's the point? But that's what I've decided Tamlin eats. There's another moment here when Feyre is describing about the group winnowing. Quote, but Dagden was slower than I anticipated, given that he had to carry his sister and Jurian. I didn't fault him for it. These are 2 moments. The fact that they're not eating the food and he's not winnowing well, Feyre does not point out their weaknesses here, which I find to be really strange. She should be looking at this as, wow, here's a weakness. I can use this to my advantage, but she's not doing that. And I have to keep asking myself why, and I think it's because she's getting a little cocky. Does Feyre think of herself as being stronger than them, and she doesn't imagine them to be all that powerful as she originally thought?
I think that's a great point. You know what just struck me as well? I wonder if they looked at the sandwiches like they were maggots because there was Faebane in them.
Probably, yeah, definitely. Cassian would have clocked these things.
Right?
And I feel like she's letting her teacher down right here.
I think so too. I think she's not on guard enough. She's too cocky.
She's definitely too cocky. In a good way. We love it. Lucien and Feyre get to talk, and Feyre encourages Lucien not to listen to Tamlin. Quote, if you yield to him on every bit of paranoia and territorialism, you'll just make it worse. Yeah, that's exactly what happened. Everyone made it worse by letting Tamlin think that Feyre was taken away. Even though I'm understanding Lucien more and I'm starting to get some sympathy for him, I'm still going to call out the bullshit. Which we get here is some Lucien bullshit. Lucien responds to Feyre telling him not to encourage Tamlin by saying, quote, I think it's made worse because you two haven't, you haven't, right? We're talking about sex. Lucien has shifted the blame of Tamlin's behavior to Feyre because she is the keeper of sex and women are just bodies to have sex with, and our worth is determined by who we allow to be with us.
And that men are allowed to be shitty if they don't have sex.
Right? That excuse of like, well, he's just acting this way because
he needs to get laid.
You haven't given it up. Even though everyone believes that she's been assaulted at this point, that it's like, yeah, but if you could just put your trauma away for 1 second to make him happy, I think everyone would be better. Thanks.
So shitty.
So shitty. Lucien thinks that if Feyre and Tamlin just had sex, then things between them would be better. But we know for a fact that that is not the case because in Mist and Fury, at the beginning of it, Feyre and Tamlin were having tons of sex and not talking about things, and it only made everything worse.
Exactly.
Did nothing to heal them.
As Feyre and Lucien prepare for bed, Lucien explains why Tamlin couldn't break or fight against the bargain Feyre and Rhys had made while under the mountain. Quote, if he'd, Tamlin, kept you here, the magic that bound you to Rhys might have come to claim his life as payment for yours, or the life of someone he cared about. Okay, so you're telling me Tamlin is interested in self-preservation, that it wouldn't be worth his life to break Feyre free of a bargain.
Yeah, no, Rhys 100% would have been like, yeah, I'm done. Go ahead. Yeah, I want her free.
Slit my throat. We'll make it work.
Here you go. Here's the knife.
Yeah, Lucien's not helping Feyre's prejudice here. It's here that we learn that Lucien went to the day court to try to find out information about how to break Feyre's bargain with Rhys. The trend of Thorns and Roses continues. Tamlin and Lucien chose to not give Feyre information for her benefit. And though Lucien appears to be giving Feyre information here, he continues to withhold information as well.
We also learn that Lucien is the one who gave Tamlin the go-ahead with Hybern. Quote, I finally told him to go ahead with it after that day in the forest. Again, people are supporting Tamlin in ways that change the narrative. This is also a part of where we learn that Tamlin killed every sentry who had been on guard the day that Feyre left, and Tamlin couldn't have been stopped. It's writing like this that's really subtle and adds layers. Tamlin isn't perfect and innocent and still has a lot to apologize for. We just found out, like in such a short amount of time, we find out, okay, well, Lucien was the one who kind of gave that go-ahead. He had a lot more power. And then we're like, oh, well, maybe Tamlin, some sympathy there. And then we find out he killed everyone. So layers. It's just such subtle writing where all of a sudden you get so many layers so quickly.
Yeah, and it just, again, speaks to the fact that both Lucien and Tamlin are as complex as Feyre and Rhys are.
Oh, yeah.
This next point I want to bring up, I title Sex and Death, an Evolution from Love and Violence. Over the last 2 seasons, Jac and I have spoken a lot about how love is tied to violence. We see that escalate in Wings and Ruin to sex and death being interrelated. An early sign of this theme is the conversation between Branna and Feyre about Lucien and Autumn Court males. Branna says, Autumn Court males have fire in their blood, and they fuck like it too. Feyre responds, I suppose you know from experience. Branna, why do you think I had so much fun in the war? I like how she's like a high school mean girl.
Yeah.
This theme is going to continue. I'm not quite sure what it means, except maybe there's like life and death in all things. Jac, what do you think?
I had a couple of thoughts in regards to this conversation. The first one was like, it may be obvious to everyone else, but I had to like get to this point. But I was like, how does she know this? Like, wasn't she on the opposite side of the Autumn Court? Because the Autumn Court was fighting with the humans. And then I was like, oh shit, she's talking about sexual assault, isn't she? And that's like the fire and stuff. So that kind of took a beat for me to get there. And I was like, oh no, you're evil. We already knew it, but damn. Also, with this quote here, Quote, I shook my head, trying not to imagine Elaine subject to that fire. Feyre is virginalizing Elaine. Elaine has had sex at this point. Granted, like, no one knows about it, but Elaine has had sex. She is into it. And eventually, Elaine is interested in Azriel. And you do not thirst for Daddy Azzy and don't like it some kind of rough.
So true. But we assume that Feyre's right. And we assume that virgin Elaine is naive.
And couldn't handle fiery Lucian.
And naively likes Daddy Azzy because he's pretty to look at.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what they're like. Oh, Elaine likes Azriel because
he's so kind and gentle.
He's kind and gentle and quiet.
Handsome.
And she's like, no.
I like it rough.
He can tie me up with the shadows. Like, yes, please. Which, again, like later on throughout this whole book, I think I'll make little cases as to like why her crush on Azriel is so not real.
Okay.
And I think that's part of it. The whole sex thing. We'll get to it.
Okay. Chapter 6 ends with 3 children of the blessed showing up, and Chapter 7 starts with, quote, Branna and Dagden looking like they just found their second breakfast. They, and even Lucian with his, quote, cruel beauty, appear to be the perfect predators, beautiful, alluring, and deadly. The children of the blessed are the prey, one even having, quote, honey gold skin, just like a snack.
There are a few references that make it seem like the twins want to eat the humans. And we've never seen that before, right? That like high fae want to eat humans. And I guess that's not technically cannibalism, but also like, ew, no?
No, I mean, we never get details about the type of torture that Hybern fae inflict on humans or others. And I have always assumed it was some sort of cannibalism and sexual assault.
Yeah, it's bad. I mean, but like, even Feyre describes their minds yielded like butter melting on my tongue. Like, it just, no.
It's like monkey brains.
No, it makes me think of Indiana Jones.
It makes me think of Hannibal.
No.
The idea of sex and death continues in this encounter. When the children of the blessed look at the Hybern commanders, quote, the dark-haired girl blushed at Dagden's intense stare, seeing the high fae beauty and none of the predator. When Feyre tries to get the humans to go away, Branna flat out says, quote, there's no death here, only pleasure if you're willing. She's basically implying sex, but really means death.
Yep.
And Sarah knows what she's doing.
It's great. There's also an emphasis on the children part of the children of the blessed. When Lucian says, we accept no tribute from the human lands, least of all children, Feyre mentally thinks that they're only a few years younger than her. Feyre has really molded into this identity of being fae. And with being fae, age kind of blurs a little bit. It ends up being not so much of a thing as it is like you're fae. But by mentally pointing this out, Feyre is connecting herself to the humans. It's almost a reminder that she too was once human, and the fact that she's a child.
Yeah, she's 20. That's it.
Your brain is still not done. You have 5 more years before your brain is done developing.
And I apologize to anyone who is 20 or younger, but man, there's still a lot more growing that happens in that next decade.
Like, I used to say like in my 20s, and this is totally a 20s thing, who you are changes every 6 months.
Absolutely.
Like every 6 months, you're a different person than you were 6 months ago. I think that slows down a lot when you're in your 30s because you're just too tired.
It's true.
Like, I can't deal with this
I've lived too many lives.
Yeah. But like, you're like who you are at 20 is not the human you are at 22 even.
Yeah, if I think about every birthday I had in my 20s, I was a different human being at every birthday party.
No, yeah. Like, call me Taylor Swift. I had eras.
It's true.
And they came on a 6 months basis.
One little thing I noticed is that the children of the blessed are wearing silver jewelry. In the prior chapter, I made notes in my book that Feyre fixates on Ianthe's silver rings a lot, and it hit me at this point that this is a clue that the children of the blessed may indeed be connected to the priestesses, a thought Feyre once had back in Mist and Fury.
I love that. But I also, like, when I was looking at him, like, this, like, random thought comes up in my mind. I'm wondering if it's also a sign of who's the weakest in the room. Because Ianthe was the weakest there, and the children of the blessed are the weakest here. And if you think back to the earlier books, in Thorns and Roses, when Feyre would hold cutlery, we can assume that that was probably silver because they're in a nice home, right?
So it's called silverware.
Silverware, exactly. So, you know, we're just gonna, I think yours is the right answer. But now I'm going to be determined to double down on mine.
Silver is weakness.
Silver is weakness.
Jurian drops another very obvious clue that he's on Feyre's team when he thanks her for scaring off the children of the blessed. Instead of a wink this time, though, he shows off a, quote, knowing smirk. He felt very Rhys to me here. I can't decide, though, if he's actually good at playing the mole role or if he's just way too obvious.
I find them also to be similar, but I find them to be similar the same way that friends are similar. Like, you and I pick up each other's mannerisms. I definitely pick up some of Nicole's. Like, when you're familiar with someone, especially when you think of the fact that Jurian's been watching Rhys for the last 50 years.
It's true.
Also, Jurian thanks Feyre for taking care of the humans, implying that he knows about her Damati skills. And why doesn't Feyre try to look into his mind? He is hinting that he knows about her powers. Shouldn't she, at the very least, be like, I wonder how much he knows. Let me check.
Mm-hmm.
We've just proven that human minds are weak.
Yeah, they melt like butter.
On your tongue.
When Jurian talks about the children of the blessed later that evening, it's semi-obvious to Feyre that he's not who he appears to be. She says, quote, careful, or you might not sound like Hybern's faithful pet. Prior to this, it's always been Rhys and Feyre that have been called pets. Rhys was Amaranthe's pet, while Feyre was Tamlin and then Rhys's pet. Feyre is trying to take control of the situation by degrading Jurian to this level, trying to demean him into admitting what side he's on.
But on the flip side, the lines before this, Jurian says, quote, we were slaves and whores and laborers for millennia. And this to me sounds like he's relating to what Rhys went through under the mountain with Amarantha. We start to get some tea about Jurian and Miriam. Quote, everything I did during the war, it was for Miriam and me. For our people to survive and one day be free. And she left me for that pretty-faced prince the moment I put my people before her. Miriam told me to go ahead and fuck her. Clythia. For more information, told me to seduce Clythia until she sold out all of Hybern and the Loyalists. She had no qualms with that, none. Again, it's the idea of consequences. Miriam let certain things and storylines play out, but what were the consequences of that? If you really think there's a lot to them. And I find this moment here to be a cautionary tale for Feyre. Jurian calls Feyre out on her desire for revenge, and I wonder if it's too real of a word for Feyre, especially as Jurian goes into the good and honorable man he knows Rhys to be. It can start to put her actions in perspective, and I think this is meant to be a moment for Feyre to reflect on her actions, but instead ignores the parallels.
I also wonder if the story Jurian shares about Rhys is supposed to tempt Feyre to look into Jurian's mind, as Jac suggested, or second-guess his motives so that Feyre gets clued in on the fact that Jurian is on Feyre and Rhys's side. But Feyre's too spooked by the word revenge to engage the way Jurian intended.
I was thinking about how that conversation ends and Jurian says, like, you're all going to die.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I find that to be a warning where it's like, if you keep up with this shit, Feyre,
yeah,
you're all going to die. Like,
you're doing yourself.
Yes, stop it. Lucien wakes Feyre up the next morning with a hand over her mouth so that she doesn't make a sound.
Because that's really, really comforting.
It's a totally logical way to wake someone else up by not wanting them to make a noise. Like, Amy, how would you react if I put my hand over your mouth and I was like, wake up?
I would lick it.
And I would scream.
See, that's what people don't understand is that nobody wants to be licked.
On their palm, like right in the dead center. Ugh.
It's not a good feeling.
It's not. As Feyre and Lucien go looking for the twins, they get to be a team, a unit, and it's something that they never got to be. I'll also say it's something that Lucien has never got to be with anyone, period. Not with Tamlin, not with his brothers, and this is making Lucien and Feyre more like family and helping us believe that when Lucien leaves with Feyre, it's not just for Elaine, but because Feyre is the only family he has.
I will also say that there's something reminiscent about the scene and Feyre's time with Azriel and Cassian in Mist and Fury. Being a unit is a very military Illyrian thing that Feyre has been trained for by the two winged males. For her to be able to form something similar with Lucien indicates her readiness to trust him to some regard. Feyre and Lucien eventually find the leftovers of Dagden and Branna's escapades. As they approach the scene, Feyre, quote, devoured the details of the surroundings as if she were a starving man at a feast. If we think back to food as power as a theme, Feyre is left starving. She's weak. In contrast, the chapter began with the Hybern commanders looking like they'd found a second breakfast, far from starving. And so, Feyre finds herself on the losing end of this round with Dagden and Branna. Lucien calls it out when he says, quote, "They could have killed them in the mortal lands, but they brought them here to make a statement about their power."
When Feyre finds the human remains, she puts her cloak over the body parts. And it's such foreshadowing for later with the cereal and with the cereal's death. It's another moment that really highlights Feyre's human heart. Also, what the hell happened to the bodies? Like, what did they do to them?
I think we're just supposed to imagine the worst. And the state of the bodies and Feyre's feelings on that is another moment that highlights Feyre's human heart. Feyre remembers Claire Better and the Golden Queen at the site of the dismemberment. She observes that, quote, "Hybern's brand of torture wasn't very creative. Claire, the Golden Queen, and these three, a similar mutilating and torment." And this is when Feyre really starts to get reckless. If you think about it, Feyre is most reckless with her choices after seeing Claire's body in Thorns and Roses. She made the bargain with Amarantha and Rhys. When she saw the Golden Queen die in Mist and Fury, look at everything she did during the Battle of Velaris. Mm-hmm. And now with the Children of the Blessed. She's really going to amp up her actions against Hybern and Ianthe, and it's going to bite her in the ass.
Yep.
Feyre's attitude is obvious in this quote. The Hybern royals hadn't bothered to clean up their mess. They are essentially children, in Feyre's view, and Feyre intends to teach them a lesson, not realizing they're going to fight back.
One of the quotes you also just read, where she says that Hybern's brand of torture wasn't creative, it's like, so what would you do, Feyre? Do you think what you're doing right now is particularly creative?
Right.
Like, it's interesting that she kind of puts them down that way.
Yeah, it is.
Like, she finds herself to be superior. Like, she goes to the Night Court one time.
The Court of Nightmares.
The Court of Nightmares one time. And literally nothing crazy bad happens.
Yeah.
Like, Rhys snaps Kyr's arm. Boo freaking who. But, like, they're not that creative. It's just like she's really high on her britches right now.
She really is.
The come down is so good.
Yeah, it is. It's fabulous.
It's like that other TikTok. Consequence. Running from my consequence right now. No.
Oh, okay. I haven't seen that one.
Hold on. This is actually worth.
Consequences of my actions chasing me right now.
Oh, I have heard that.
I don't want no consequence. I don't want no consequences chasing me right now.
This is Feyre.
Someone take this consequence. Someone take this consequence that's chasing me right now. Jesus, take the consequence. Jesus, take the consequence.
That's amazing. And just so that I have, like, that's user on TikTok, Astra Rossborn. TikTok handle, just to give him credit. But to me, this entire episode, I've been singing that in my mind because that's Feyre running away from her consequences. So let's get into some breadcrumbs. In chapter 6, quote, "A faint, low headache was already forming. The Damati smiled back at me. I hadn't felt another touch on my mental barriers, or the ones I'd been working to keep around as many people here as possible. The constant use of my power was wearing on me. Febane? Anyone? Just going to throw that out there."
We also learn, as Jac mentioned earlier in the episode, that Tamlin executed the sentries who were on duty when Feyre was taken by Mor back to the Night Court. The fact that the sentries didn't dare speak up against Tamlin because he's High Lord is awful, but also clever foreshadowing about the encounter Tamlin, Ianthe, Feyre, and the sentries are going to have in just a few chapters.
Mm-hmm. In chapter 7, quote, "Spearing my power through the wall had left me with a lingering, pounding headache all day, more than a bit dizzy." More Febane, more weakening of powers.
All the headaches. Also in chapter 7, Jurian says he's helping Hybern, quote, "to draw Miriam out of her little nest with that winged prick and make her regret it." Feyre responds, "You get a second shot at life and that's what you wish to do? What? Revenge?"
Feyre.
It's ironic for so many reasons, but especially because the opposite is true.
Feyre. So let's revisit the question we asked at the beginning of the episode. To what extent is Feyre rewriting the narrative? Amy.
Oh man, this one is kind of hard to answer. She's rewriting the narrative in a lot of ways. She's rewriting her memories of her time with Tamlin and Lucien in the Spring Court. the way she rewrites that narrative influences her choices here and the destructive behavior that she's enacting on the Spring Court. She's also rewriting the narrative about some of her memories of Rhys to justify her actions.
Yeah.
And it's really fascinating to me how she doesn't see what she's doing and how she's becoming, like we discussed, Amarantha.
I think what we're seeing a lot of here is that she's rewriting past narrative as well as present narrative, because she thinks that she's balancing all of this magic and she's kicking ass and everything. But we're looking at this and it's like there's so many people who are catching on to her bullshit right now that she's not willing to look at. And it's almost as if, like, if she were to be honest, then it would be, wow, maybe I made a mistake.
Yeah.
It's a lot harder to learn to understand someone and forgive them than it is to try to get revenge. And I think that's what we're seeing here is her taking the easy way out, because let's be real, Feyre could have left the second she got to the Spring Court.
She didn't have to stay.
No. I was thinking about that, where it could have been the smartest move for her to be like, okay, I'll go with you. Bye, bitches. Yeah, like, I'm out. If she really wanted to do something, I don't know, fake your death. Like, you know, she didn't have to be there this whole entire time. But like, she's there purely not to be a spy, really. That's a small percentage, but to bring the whole court down. And it's just like, that's not the Pharaoh we know. That's not who she knows. And she's going to have to like find herself again.
Yeah. Going back to something you said, it's hard to get revenge when you see the person you're getting revenge against is actually trying.
Yeah.
And she observes a lot of growth, but does not acknowledge it and tries to push that down.
Which then in turn stunts her own growth.
Exactly. And we're going to say this a lot in this season. A lot could have been avoided or done differently here that would have saved her pain, saved Tamlin pain, saved the entirety of the Spring Court pain. If she had just been like, you know what? Maybe this is the wrong approach. Maybe I need to have a conversation.
Yes. There's like this, I can't remember who said it, but I saw it somewhere. And I try to think about this a lot. No one thinks they're the bad guy. When you're having an argument, like, or even in these, I think they were talking about in reference to Star Wars. Like, it's not like Darth Vader was like, yes, I'm the bad guy. Like, no one everyone thinks they're doing it for their reasons. Now, some people are entirely wrong. Look at Hybern here. But rather than taking a beat and being like, Tamlin doesn't think he's the bad guy. Why is that?
Right.
Then, you know, like, it starts to get messy. That's why people on TikTok really love to argue on Tamlin and whether he deserves a redemption arc because, you know, he did abusive things, but was he an abuser? I think the answer could be yes to both, but I do believe that he does enough in this book that he's now open to a redemption arc, which, as we always say on our lives, doesn't mean love.
No, doesn't mean a happy ending.
No. A redemption arc does not mean like he ends up with
he gets
lady.
the girl.
Yeah.
And No. He could lose the Spring Court. He could renounce his High Lord title.
He could lose an arm.
He could die.
Yeah. It's also a redemption arc. It's still a redemption arc.
Yep.
Which I think that SJM totally has it open to. Because eventually with Silver Flames, Grease goes to check in on him and he's just like, roam the woods. His fur is probably all matted.
Oh, he's got dreadlocks now.
Yeah, just like, you know, like when dogs and cats have like matted fur.
Yep.
And then you have to shave him. And he's like a shaved little lion.
Aww. Here's this week's listener review from Apple Podcasts.
This comes from Bramps Clan, titled, "Don't Miss This Podcast, book fans. If this had been the way my high school literature class was, I'd have definitely paid attention instead of hating school. Such great insights and opinions and sheds new light on ACOTAR for me. I'm rereading as I listen to this podcast. My favorite podcast of all time."
Aww.
Of all time?
You're somebody's favorite?
I'm no one's favorite. Not even my mother's, and I'm her only child. That's so not true. She'd be so mad if she heard that.
It's true. But I love that. That's so sweet. And I loved high school, but I'm honored that someone would love us more than they loved high school.
I didn't like high school, but I liked literature class. But all my literature classes were books I don't like or read.
Yeah, fair.
Great Gatsby, screw you. But thank you. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Bramps Clan.
Please go to Apple Podcasts and leave a review, and we'll read it on one of our weekly episodes.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Book Talk for Book Talk. We encourage you to rate and subscribe to our show on your preferred podcast listening platform. Next week, we will be exploring chapters 8 through 10 of A Court of Wings and Ruin.
We would love to hear your thoughts based on today's conversation. You can submit your comments to our form at booktalkforbooktalk.com for a chance to have your feedback discussed during a weekly mini episode.
If you are enjoying the podcast, please visit our website, booktalkforbooktalk.com, to view our latest merch and learn about supporting the show through Patreon, Ko-Fi, or Venmo. You can also follow us on TikTok or Instagram at the handle booktalkforbooktalk. Bye!
Fall has officially started here in Los Angeles, and that means we finally get to do fall activities.
I have been counting down the days for when I can go to pumpkin patches, maybe even hit up an apple orchard, and I get to do all of it looking super cute in my Quince boyfriend sweater.
This weather is perfect for my dark academia vibes, and I'm so excited to bust out my washable silk blouse because you know I'm going to be taking pictures.
Quince is known for their Mongolian cashmere sweaters from $50. And that's not all. Quince has so many other amazing things on their website.
All of those items are priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands.
That includes leather jackets, cotton cardigans, soft denim. Like, my entire fall wardrobe is genuinely turning into Quince wardrobe.
By partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the cost of the middleman, we get savings as the customer.
One of my favorite parts about Quince is the fact that they only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices. And they still manage to get premium fabrics and finishes for that, luxury feeling for every item that they have.
Get cozy in Quince's high-quality wardrobe essentials. Go to quince.com/booktalk for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's Quince, QUINCE.com/booktalk, BOOKTALK, to get free shipping and 365-day returns. That's quince.com/booktalk.